I still remember the day my daughter stopped talking to me like it was yesterday. It was a typical Tuesday morning, and I had just gotten back from a business trip. I walked into the house, expecting to see my daughter's bright smile and hear her cheerful voice, but instead, I was met with silence. At first, I thought maybe she was just going through a phase or was busy with school, but as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, I realized that something was seriously wrong. I tried calling her, texting her, and even showing up at her school, but she refused to talk to me. As the years went by, I heard rumors about my daughter's life from friends and family members. They would tell me that she was struggling in school, that she had gotten into some trouble with the law, and that she was working multiple jobs just to make ends meet. But whenever I tried to reach out to her, she would shut me down. It wasn't until I received a letter in the mail that I discovered the shocking truth about my daughter's debt. I was sitting at my kitchen table, sipping my coffee and reading the newspaper, when I saw the letter. It was from a collections agency, and it stated that my daughter owed over $40,000 in debt. I was stunned. I had no idea that my daughter was in such financial trouble. I immediately tried calling her, but she didn't answer. I left her a voicemail, telling her that I loved her and that I wanted to help her, but she didn't call me back. I was devastated. I felt like I had failed as a parent, and that I had let my daughter down. I didn't know what to do, so I just sat there, staring at the letter, feeling helpless and hopeless. But as I sat there, something inside of me clicked. I realized that I couldn't just sit back and do nothing. I had to take action, I had to help my daughter, no matter what it took. And so, I started making phone calls, trying to get to the bottom of my daughter's debt. I talked to the collections agency, and they told me that my daughter had been making payments, but that she was still behind on her debt. I talked to my daughter's creditors, and they told me that she had been struggling to make payments for years. As I dug deeper, I discovered that my daughter's debt was not just from credit cards and loans, but also from medical bills and other expenses. I realized that she had been struggling to make ends meet, and that she had been hiding it from me. I was heartbroken. I felt like I had failed my daughter, and that I had let her down. But I also felt determined. I was going to help my daughter, no matter what it took. I was going to get to the bottom of her debt, and I was going to help her pay it off. And so, I started making a plan. I started by talking to my daughter, trying to get her to open up to me about her debt. I told her that I loved her, and that I wanted to help her, and slowly but surely, she started to open up to me. She told me about her struggles, about how she had been trying to make ends meet, but that she had been struggling to pay her bills. She told me about her medical bills, and about how she had been hiding it from me. I listened to her, and I offered her my support. I told her that I would do whatever it took to help her, and that I would be there for her every step of the way. And so, we started working together. We started making a plan to pay off her debt, and we started taking steps to get her back on her feet. It wasn't easy, but we did it. We worked together, and we got her debt paid off. It was a long and difficult journey, but in the end, it was worth it. My daughter was finally debt-free, and she was finally able to start rebuilding her life. And I was finally able to start rebuilding our relationship. I learned a lot from this experience. I learned that being a parent doesn't just mean providing for your child's physical needs, but also being there for them emotionally. I learned that being a parent means being supportive, and being there for your child, no matter what. And I also learned that it's never too late to make things right. It's never too late to reach out to your child, and to start rebuilding your relationship. It's never too late to make a change, and to start making things better. I hope that my story can inspire others to take action, and to start making a change in their own lives. I hope that my story can show others that it's never too late to make things right, and that it's never too late to start rebuilding relationships. And I hope that my story can also show others that being a parent is not just about providing for your child's physical needs, but also about being there for them emotionally. Being a parent is about being supportive, and being there for your child, no matter what. I hope that my story can inspire others to be better parents, and to be more supportive of their children. And I hope that my story can also inspire others to take action, and to start making a change in their own lives. As we worked together to pay off her debt, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. We were finally making progress, and my daughter was finally starting to rebuild her life. But as we delved deeper into her finances, I began to notice something strange. There were transactions on her bank statements that I didn't recognize, and there were payments to companies that I had never heard of. At first, I thought maybe she had just forgotten to tell me about some of her expenses, but as I dug deeper, I realized that something was off. I asked my daughter about the transactions, but she just shrugged it off and told me that she didn't know anything about them. I was starting to get a little suspicious, and I decided to do some more digging. I spent hours poring over her bank statements, looking for any clues that might explain what was going on. And then, I found it. A small transaction to a company called Quick Cash that had been made just a few days before she stopped talking to me. I had never heard of Quick Cash before, and I couldn't find any information about them online. I decided to call the company and see if I could get some answers. When I finally got someone on the phone, they told me that Quick Cash was a payday loan company, and that my daughter had taken out a loan with them just before she stopped talking to me. I was shocked. I had no idea that my daughter was in such financial trouble, and I couldn't believe that she had turned to a payday loan company for help. I asked the representative from Quick Cash to tell me more about the loan, and they informed me that my daughter had taken out a loan for $5,000, with an interest rate of over 300%. I was appalled. I knew that payday loan companies were notorious for their predatory practices, and I couldn't believe that my daughter had fallen victim to one of them. I asked the representative if they had any information about why my daughter had taken out the loan, and they told me that they didn't have any information about that. I was determined to get to the bottom of this, and I decided to do some more digging. I spent hours researching payday loan companies, and I discovered that they were notorious for their high interest rates and predatory practices. I realized that my daughter had probably been taken advantage of, and that she had been forced to take out the loan because she had no other options. I was starting to feel a sense of outrage and anger. I couldn't believe that these companies were allowed to operate, and I couldn't believe that they were taking advantage of people like my daughter. I decided to take action, and I started making phone calls to my local representatives, demanding that they do something to regulate these companies. As I continued to dig deeper, I discovered that Quick Cash was just the tip of the iceberg. There were dozens of other payday loan companies operating in my area, and they were all taking advantage of people like my daughter. I realized that this was a much bigger problem than I had initially thought, and I decided to take a stand. I started a campaign to raise awareness about the dangers of payday loan companies, and I began to work with local advocacy groups to push for legislation that would regulate these companies. It was a tough fight, but I was determined to see it through. As I continued to work on this campaign, I started to notice that my daughter was acting strange. She was distant and preoccupied, and she seemed to be hiding something from me. I asked her what was wrong, but she just shook her head and told me that everything was fine. I didn't believe her. I knew that something was wrong, and I was determined to find out what it was. I started to investigate, and I discovered that my daughter had been in contact with someone from Quick Cash. They had been calling her and texting her, and they had been threatening her. I was furious. I couldn't believe that these people were harassing my daughter, and I decided to take action. I called the police and reported the harassment, and I also contacted a lawyer to see if we could sue Quick Cash for their predatory practices. As the days went by, the situation continued to escalate. My daughter was getting more and more anxious, and I could tell that she was scared. I tried to reassure her that everything would be okay, but I could tell that she didn't believe me. And then, one day, I received a call from an unknown number. It was a man with a deep voice, and he told me that he was from Quick Cash. He informed me that my daughter had missed a payment, and that they were going to take action if she didn't pay up. I was furious. I told the man that we were going to sue them for their predatory practices, and that they would never get another penny from us. The man just laughed and told me that we would regret it if we didn't pay up. I was shaking with anger. I couldn't believe that these people were threatening me and my daughter. I decided to take a stand, and I told the man that we would never back down. But as I hung up the phone, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The man's voice had sounded familiar, and I couldn't help but wonder if I had heard it before. And then, it hit me. The man's voice was the same voice as my daughter's ex-boyfriend, the one who had been causing her so much trouble. I couldn't believe it. I had been so focused on Quick Cash that I had forgotten about him. I realized that my daughter's ex-boyfriend was probably behind the whole thing. He had probably been working with Quick Cash to take advantage of my daughter, and he had probably been the one who had been harassing her. I was furious. I couldn't believe that he would stoop so low, and I decided to take action. I started to investigate, and I discovered that my daughter's ex-boyfriend had been in deep financial trouble. He had been taking out loans from all sorts of companies, and he had been using my daughter's name to do it. I was shocked. I couldn't believe that he would use my daughter like that. I decided to take action, and I started to gather evidence. I was determined to expose him for what he was, and I was determined to make sure that he paid for what he had done. But as I continued to investigate, I realized that things were more complicated than I had initially thought. There were more players involved, and there were more motives at play. I started to feel a sense of unease, and I realized that I was in over my head. I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know who to trust. I was starting to feel like I was in a nightmare, and I didn't know how to wake up. As I continued to investigate, I started to notice that my daughter's ex-boyfriend was not the only one who was involved in this scheme. There were other people, other companies, and other motives at play. I started to feel like I was in a web of deceit, and I didn't know how to untangle myself. I decided to take a step back and reevaluate the situation. I started to think about all the people who had been involved, and all the companies that had been mentioned. I thought about Quick Cash, and how they had been harassing my daughter. I thought about my daughter's ex-boyfriend, and how he had been using her name to take out loans. And then, I started to think about my daughter. I thought about how she had been acting strange, and how she had been distant and preoccupied. I thought about how she had been receiving mysterious phone calls and texts, and how she had been getting anxious and scared. As I thought about my daughter, I started to feel a sense of unease. I realized that she was more involved in this scheme than I had initially thought. I realized that she had been keeping secrets from me, and that she had been hiding things from me. I decided to confront my daughter. I sat her down and asked her to tell me the truth. I asked her about the loans, and about the phone calls and texts. I asked her about her ex-boyfriend, and about Quick Cash. At first, my daughter was hesitant to talk. She seemed scared and anxious, and she didn't want to say anything. But I kept pushing her, and eventually, she started to open up. She told me that she had been in a difficult situation, and that she had made some mistakes. She told me that she had taken out loans from Quick Cash, and that she had been struggling to pay them back. She told me that her ex-boyfriend had been involved, and that he had been using her name to take out loans. As my daughter talked, I started to feel a sense of shock and betrayal. I couldn't believe that she had kept all of this from me, and that she had been hiding it from me. I felt like I didn't know my daughter at all, and that she had been living a secret life. But as I listened to my daughter, I also started to feel a sense of compassion and understanding. I realized that she had been in a difficult situation, and that she had made mistakes. I realized that she had been scared and anxious, and that she had been trying to protect herself. I decided to forgive my daughter, and to help her. I told her that I would do everything I could to support her, and that I would help her to get out of this situation. I told her that I would help her to pay off the loans, and that I would help her to deal with her ex-boyfriend in quick cash. As I talked to my daughter, I started to feel a sense of hope and determination. I realized that we could get through this, and that we could come out stronger on the other side. I realized that we could face the challenges ahead, and that we could overcome them. But just as I was starting to feel hopeful, I received a phone call. It was from an unknown number, and the voice on the other end was menacing and threatening. "You'll never take us down," the voice said. "You'll never expose us. We'll make sure of it." I felt a chill run down my spine as I listened to the voice. I realized that we were in grave danger, and that we had to be careful. I realized that we had to be prepared for anything, and that we had to be ready to face the challenges ahead. I hung up the phone, and I turned to my daughter. "We have to be careful," I told her. "We have to be prepared for anything. We don't know what they're capable of, and we don't know what they'll do." My daughter nodded, and she looked scared. "What are we going to do?" she asked. I took a deep breath, and I tried to think. I knew that we had to be careful, and that we had to be prepared. I knew that we had to be smart, and that we had to be strategic. "We'll get through this," I told my daughter. "We'll face the challenges ahead, and we'll come out stronger on the other side. We'll expose them, and we'll bring them down. We'll make sure that they pay for what they've done." My daughter nodded, and she looked determined. "Let's do it," she said. And with that, we started to make a plan. We started to gather evidence, and we started to build a case. We started to reach out to other people, and we started to build a network of allies. We were determined to take down Quick Cash, and to expose them for their predatory practices. We were determined to bring them to justice, and to make sure that they paid for what they had done. And as we worked, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and determination. I knew that we were in for a tough fight, but I also knew that we were in it together. I knew that we would face challenges and obstacles, but I also knew that we would overcome them. We were a team, and we were unstoppable. We were going to take down Quick Cash, and we were going to make sure that they paid for what they had done. As we continued to gather evidence and build our case, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every time I turned around, I expected to see someone lurking in the shadows, waiting to pounce. I started to vary my daily routine, taking different routes to and from work, and changing my schedule to throw off anyone who might be following me. My daughter noticed my increased paranoia and asked me if everything was okay. I hesitated, not wanting to alarm her, but eventually, I told her about my concerns. She listened intently, her eyes wide with worry. "What can we do?" she asked. I took a deep breath and tried to reassure her. "We'll be fine," I said. "We just need to be careful and stay vigilant." But as the days went by, my unease only grew. I started to receive strange phone calls, with no one on the other end. I would answer, and there would be silence. Then, suddenly, the line would go dead. I tried to brush it off as a prank caller, but the calls continued, and I started to feel a sense of unease. One night, I came home from work to find my front door open. I was certain I had locked it before I left, but now it was wide open, creaking in the wind. I stepped inside, my heart racing, and called out to my daughter. She didn't answer. I rushed through the house, searching for her, but she was nowhere to be found. I tried calling her phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Panic set in as I realized she was missing. I called the police, and they arrived quickly, but as we searched the house and the neighborhood, there was no sign of my daughter. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. The police took my statement and promised to do everything they could to find my daughter. But as the hours ticked by, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I started to imagine the worst-case scenarios, and my mind was racing with fear. Where was my daughter? Who had taken her? And what did they want from us? The police finally found a lead. A surveillance camera caught a glimpse of a person matching my daughter's description getting into a car. But the plate was obscured, and they couldn't make out the make or model of the vehicle. I was beside myself with worry, and I couldn't eat or sleep. I was constantly on edge, waiting for any news about my daughter's whereabouts. And then, just as suddenly as she had disappeared, my daughter reappeared. She walked through the front door, looking shaken but unharmed. I rushed to her, tears of relief streaming down my face. "Where were you?" I demanded. "Who took you?" But my daughter just shook her head, her eyes wide with fear. "I don't know," she whispered. "I don't remember anything. But I think we're in grave danger." I pulled her into a tight hug, holding her close as I tried to process what was happening. We were in danger, and I didn't know who or what was behind it. But I was determined to protect my daughter, no matter what it took. As we hugged, I heard a noise behind me. I turned to see a figure standing in the shadows, watching us. My heart skipped a beat as I realized we were being watched, and I knew we had to get out of there, fast. I quickly grabbed my daughter's hand and pulled her towards the back door. We had to get out of there, and fast. I could feel the eyes of the figure on us, boring into our skin. I didn't dare look back, fearing what I might see. As we ran through the kitchen, I heard the sound of footsteps behind us. The figure was giving chase. My heart was racing, my mind was reeling. Where could we go? Who could we trust? I pushed open the back door and we spilled out into the night. The cool air hit us like a slap in the face, but I didn't slow down. I kept running, pulling my daughter behind me. We sprinted across the lawn, not stopping until we reached the safety of our car. I yanked open the door and pushed my daughter inside. "Get down!" I shouted, as I jumped into the driver's seat. I started the engine and peeled out of the driveway, not looking back. We sped through the streets, my daughter cowering in the back seat. I didn't dare look in the rearview mirror, fearing what I might see. Where were we going? I didn't know. All I knew was that we had to get away. I drove for what felt like hours, my heart still racing. Finally, I spotted a small motel on the side of the road. I pulled in, parking in the back of the lot. We would be safe here, for the time being. I turned to my daughter, who was still shaking with fear. "It's okay," I said, trying to reassure her. "We're safe now." But she just looked at me with wide, frightened eyes. "What's going on?" she whispered. "Who's after us?" I took a deep breath, trying to think of what to say. But the truth was, I didn't know. I had no idea who was behind this, or what they wanted. All I knew was that we were in grave danger, and we had to be careful. As we sat there in the motel parking lot, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows. But there was never anyone there. Just my imagination, playing tricks on me. Or so I thought. As the night wore on, I started to feel a sense of unease. We couldn't stay here forever. We had to keep moving, to stay one step ahead of whoever was after us. But where could we go? Who could we trust? I looked over at my daughter, who was staring out the window, her eyes fixed on something in the distance. "What is it?" I asked, following her gaze. But she just shook her head. "Nothing," she said. "Just a feeling." I nodded, understanding. I had the same feeling. A feeling of being watched, of being hunted. We were in this together, my daughter and I. And we would face whatever was coming our way, side by side. But as we sat there in the darkness, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were running out of time. As the night wore on, the feeling of unease only grew. I tried to distract myself by flipping through the channels on the TV, but nothing seemed to hold my attention. My daughter was quiet, lost in her own thoughts. I could sense her fear, and it only added to my own. We were both on edge, waiting for something to happen. And then, suddenly, it did. A loud knock at the door made us both jump. My heart was racing as I slowly got up to answer it. Who could it be? I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should just ignore it. But something about the knock seemed off. It was too loud, too insistent. I cautiously made my way to the door, my daughter watching me with wide eyes. I peered through the peephole, and what I saw made my blood run cold. A man was standing in the hallway, his face twisted into a snarl. He was holding a small package, and his eyes seemed to be boring into mine. I quickly stepped back, my heart racing. Who was this man? What did he want? I didn't dare open the door. Instead, I stood frozen, my eyes fixed on the peephole. The man didn't move, didn't say a word. He just stood there, his eyes fixed on the door. I could feel my daughter's fear, could sense her trembling. We were trapped, and this man was not going away. Slowly, the man raised his hand, holding out the package. He mouthed something, but I couldn't make out what it was. I shook my head, trying to indicate that I couldn't hear him. But he just kept mouthing the words, his eyes never leaving mine. I felt a chill run down my spine. What was going on? What did this man want? I took a step back, my heart racing. I knew I had to get away from the door, to get away from this man. But as I turned to my daughter, I saw that she was frozen in place, her eyes fixed on the door. She was paralyzed with fear, and I knew I had to act fast. I grabbed her hand, pulling her away from the door. We had to get out of there, had to get away from this man. But as we turned to make a run for it, I heard the sound of the door creaking open. The man had somehow managed to get in, and now he was standing in the doorway, his eyes fixed on us. I knew we were in grave danger. I pushed my daughter behind me, trying to shield her from harm. But as I turned to face the man, I saw that he was holding something in his hand. It was a small piece of paper, and on it was written a single word, run. I felt a surge of adrenaline as I read the word on the paper. Run. It was a message from the man, a warning that we had to get out of there, fast. I didn't hesitate, grabbing my daughter's hand and pulling her towards the door. We ran as fast as we could, not looking back, not daring to look back. We ran until we were sure we had left the man and the motel behind. Finally, we slowed to a stop, gasping for breath. We were safe, for the moment. But I knew it wouldn't last. The man would find us again, and next time, he wouldn't be so easy to escape. I looked at my daughter, saw the fear in her eyes, and knew that I had to do something. I had to protect her, no matter what it took. And then, it hit me. The solution to all our problems, the way to finally be free from the man and his cohorts. I remembered the detective, the one who had been investigating the quick cash scandal. I remembered his name, his phone number, and I knew that I had to call him. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number, my heart racing with anticipation. The detective answered on the first ring, and I quickly explained everything. I told him about the man, about the motel, about the note that said, run. I told him about my daughter, about how we were being hunted, and how we needed his help. The detective listened, his voice calm and reassuring. He promised to send someone over, to protect us and keep us safe. And then, he said something that made my heart soar. We've been investigating Quick Cash for months, he said. We have enough evidence to take them down, to put an end to their scams and their harassment. And we have enough evidence to put the man who's been chasing you behind bars. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, followed by a sense of satisfaction. Karma was finally catching up with the people who had been terrorizing us. The detective arrived an hour later, accompanied by several police officers. They took us into protective custody, and we finally felt safe. We finally felt like we could breathe again. As we sat in the police station, waiting for the man to be brought in, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. We had done it, my daughter and I. We had fought back, and we had won. And then, the man was brought in, handcuffed and looking smug. But as he saw us, his expression changed. He looked shocked, and then angry, and then scared. He knew that he had been caught, and that he was going down. The detective read him his rights, and then he was taken away, thrown into a cell to await trial. And as we watched him go, I felt a sense of closure. It was over, finally. The nightmare was over, and we could finally start to rebuild our lives. My daughter hugged me tightly, tears of relief streaming down her face. "Thank you, Mom," she said. "Thank you for protecting me." I hugged her back, feeling a sense of pride and satisfaction. We had done it, my daughter and I. We had fought back, and we had won. And as we walked out of the police station, into the bright sunlight, I knew that we would never be the same again. We had been through a nightmare, but we had come out the other side. We were stronger, we were braver, and we were finally free.